And motion passes unanimously. On to the action agenda. First up, we have the preliminary budget for 2025-26. I'll entertain a motion to approve the preliminary budget.
So, okay.
Motion by A, second by Michelle. All right, discussion on the preliminary budget. Is there anything that's different than what we were looking at 2 weeks ago?
No changes.
So there's no changes in what's in front of you, but the big changes are what we're hearing out of Madison. And the good news, and Eric and I, we were looking at that this morning, the good news is that the preliminary budget that got put together for the board is a fairly conservative estimate. For instance, the preliminary budget that is in front of you assumes a special ed state reimbursement rate of 33.3%. Certainly, we're hoping for higher. The governor's proposal was 60%. I think the Joint Finance Committee's action had it at 35%. So that's actually higher than what's in the preliminary budget, and we're still hopeful there's going to be additional negotiations in Madison. I do think that when we get looking at the state aid, the Joint Finance Committee had no new dollars of state aid for education in the budget that the Joint Finance Committee approved. That would put more funding on the backs of local property taxpayers. I don't think there's any it's not necessary to recalculate all of that today because it's all going to change again. Our state aid certification doesn't come out until October. We do get an estimate in July, but it'll change again in October, and then we also get our evaluation statements. So it's going to change anyway, but we certainly are concerned with what we've heard on the matter.
Just to help me navigate through the various attachments, could one of you point out kind of what the projected mill rate is going into next year compared to the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think it came in at
Eric, could you say which attachment you're looking at, please?
Sure, it has it in a few places, but the one I'm looking at is the forecast model. The budget forecast model has the graphs on the bottom. As you can see, the current year it was $5.60 for a mill rate, and then the projected mill rate for the following year would be $5.59. So just a one cent lower change.
Thanks.
But to Joe's point, like that's a number that could very easily change if that state aid reduction is finalized.
Yeah, I just want to be sure I have the right baseline in my mind. A lot of things to sort through. I think for, we look at the impact on taxpayers of whatever changes there are, that's the number certainly keep track of.
Any other questions or discussion? Right, let's vote. Motion passes unanimously. Again, thank you for all of your work on that.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our policy updates to policy 345.4, student replacement and promotion. I'll entertain a motion to approve those changes to the policy.
So, I mean, yes,
These are the same thing. Yeah, they're okay. Yeah, I'm just waiting for a second.
can I second if I made those recommendations?
Yeah.
Okay, I second.
All right. Motion by Amber, second by Emily. We are looking at a policy change that's slightly amended from what we discussed 2 weeks ago. Do you want to talk us through any of that, or?
Just that.
Brian, use the microphone.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Thank you.
I can summon them away. All right, the only changes since we discussed last time were the items that were highlighted in red in the background. I think the board members have questions and feedback on that process. I think those do a nice job of helping to further clarify.
All right, thank you for that, and your responsiveness there. Any further questions or discussion?
Want to ask Brian one question. I'm curious to know, the way I'm reading this, and I was unfortunately not at the last meeting, so, however, I did watch the lovely live stream. Okay, so I'm curious to know, being from an education background, 4K students, often there are many times when they're not ready yet to go to kindergarten. And 4K teachers recommend that they stay in 4K another year. Parents have the choice to go along with that recommendation or go ahead and place them in kindergarten regardless. I understand that a lot of parents do that because it's costly to keep them in 4K because then they have to pay for childcare half a day and that kind of thing. So I get it. My question is there any documentation showing that, establishing that that was a recommendation? And even in the younger grades, that's still going to be the deal where parents can say, we want our child to move on, even though the recommendation may be retention?
So if I'm understanding correctly, documentation that a recommendation may have been made for the student to do an additional year of 4K, and a family chooses not to have their child do an additional year of 4K, how is that documented for? So in the student's Q files, the initial repeat form, if it's filled out, is included in there. As far as the specific wording beyond that, I would have to take a closer look to see how that is documented. I know that there's a record that is kept, but how accessible is it beyond that initial year? I would have to do some follow-up to get that to you.
Okay, and what about kindergarten, like kindergarten to 1?
So, similar in nature, what I will say is when we take a look at 4K to kindergarten, we tend to see a larger number, and I'm just looking at some numbers here, anywhere between 9 and 12 students over the last 4 years per year from 4K to kindergarten that do an additional year. And then after that, it really isn't until graduation that we see any more than 2 at any one building, let alone a grade level of students that do an additional year. So from a documentation standpoint, it would be part of that student's year-to-year transfer record, and I think I'm calling it the wrong thing. Tony might be able to, as we roll students over, their grad year then changes, but their initial entry date would still stay the same.
Okay. So
So I don't know if I've answered your
Well,
question or not.
yeah, I think you're expanding on it a little bit. I'm wondering if, when parents choose to move their children forward, even though the recommendation is not to, from the education, from teachers, from principals, from, then, and that's in parents' rights, I understand that. My question is that document, like, right, I know we used EduClimber, we're moving away from it. So is there some, are we moving away from it? Okay, I'm getting confused, we're not moving away from it. Is there somewhere that's documented so future teachers can see that? So when they get kids that are really struggling, some are saying that last year's teacher recommended that, or 2 years ago, the teacher recommended that.
So short answer is I don't know how clearly that's delineated. There's a way for us to get at that information. It is something that we could talk with staff on. Is there a clearer way to make that documentation so that we're aware as a student transitions into the next grade level? But how readily available it is, I'm not sure it's super easy to see that.
Thank you.
Michelle had a question for me when I was thinking about retention and support. Do you make parents sign any kind of release form when they decide to go against what the education piece says and they want to move their children forward? The reason I ask that is because they come to a point where they feel like their child's not meeting the standards. Are they allowed to come back and say, oh, we made a mistake or whatever? And I don't know if that saves the district any liability or what that would mean, but I was just curious about that. Thank you.
So, we don't have a standard form that I do know that if a parent, chooses to do, a promotion or a retention that's opposite, we don't have a standard form for families to sign off on saying. I do know that our buildings, when they have those meetings, keep documentation of those meetings when they happen. Yeah, that's part of the student's record.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions or discussion? All right. Let's vote. And motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have an action to approve meal prices for 2025-26. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I second.
Motion by Abe, second by Dale. We have proposed increased meal prices. It's a 5 cent or 10 cent? 10-cent increase at both the elementary and middle and high school lunch, as well as adult meal prices. We did have an opportunity to talk with Stacy Nelson about this last time. I just want to say, personally, I'm really impressed at the way that the district has worked to keep meal prices affordable. And I think as a parent, like a 10-cent hike now, other than waiting, and having a 50-cent hike in a few years, seems really reasonable to me. Any questions or discussion on this? All right, let's vote. Flying through the agenda tonight. Motion passes unanimously. We're on to our discussion agenda. First up, we have our report on summer maintenance.
All right, so this is basically going right down my to-do list for the summer. With that said, I think the first page and a half are all 30-year plan projects. We've talked about these a few times now, so I'm going to skim through them a little bit, but please ask questions whenever you have it. So starting out, blacktop maintenance, this is one of the projects that we do every summer somewhere in the district. This year it's going to be here at the ASC and Oak Lawn Elementary, crack sealing and painting lines, pretty straightforward stuff. Over at Wakanda, we're going to do a little work on doors. So 2 parts to it: replace doors in the exterior receiving doors at Wakanda, and then do some work to improve the main entrance. What we've seen from the work we did at the middle school, changing up the style of hinges that we use, has been working great. It's a pretty rough crowd over there at age group operating the doors. They've been holding up great, so we're going to start spreading that to the other schools and hopefully extend the life of all of our doors. Building envelope is going to be at River Heights this summer, similar to what we did at Wakanda this past year. Door sweeps and seals, just tighten the building up a little bit. Sidewalks and parking lots. Now this one is going to be more of a planning stage. I don't think we're going to actually get into the construction of it this summer. But we're going to come up with a plan to improve the bus loop and the sidewalks around the bus loop over there. We're getting to meeting just want to take some time with it, reach out to some outside resources to make sure we get things such as ADA, all those types of codes right, we get our drainage right, things like that. So it's gonna probably involve surveys, a little extra help on that one. High school chiller, another 30-year plan project, oil separator, it's kind of a big deal over to this. This needs specific for our chiller, long lead times, and we already have it. We turned it around very quickly, so we have it in storage. We're just kind of waiting for a couple things, contractor availability and these temperatures to relax a little bit before we start working on a chiller.
Have something about your staff to allow you to accomplish the things you think are important that are included in that strategic plan.
One of the things that you'll notice is while there are 5 pillars, and there were 5 pillars in the last strategic plan, there are nuances that are different this time versus last time. And one of the nuances on the right side, even though there was a focus on partnerships, there was a strong sense of communication as we look to strengthen partnerships with families and the greater Menomonie community. That became very, very key in the focus groups and in the survey, and you'll see that reflected in that particular pillar. And then a focus on not only safety, maintenance, and efficiency, but really focusing on operations and advocacy, really telling our financial story so that we're able to obtain really community understanding of the financial challenges that the district faces, and then also returning that stewardship with smooth and efficient operations so that we earn the community's trust moving forward. So while there are 5 pillars, some of the work continues and some of the work is nuanced and will change as we look at the update of the plan. As we look at the strategic planning committee, we talked about 3 key areas. This was a group that did a wonderful job of looking at key themes found in looking at school district data, and thank you, Brian S., for helping us get that data to look at, as well as all of the listening session key themes and strategic plan survey. Then we looked at finding consensus with that group around strategic planning pillars, goals, and objectives, as well as really looking at that survey results so that we were able to find out what work needs to continue and what is new work to come. And then I think it speaks volumes that I believe there's 8 to 10 people from the strategic planning committee here tonight, really expressing support around that process and here to speak with you about some of the pillars of the plan. Really would like to make sure that we give credit to all of the people that were a part of the committee. I am not going to take time to read everyone's name, but I really am very pleased that we have all of these people here. And you see the representation from Dr. Zadowski to all of the faculty and staff, as well as families and community members, and our Board of Education member, Amber, who served on the committee very, very well. I really am proud of the voices that came to the table and that the oversight was really process-oriented and very collaborative. People owned this process, and that to me is something that you really want in this process. It wasn't our plan or the district's plan from the administration, but this committee really owned the work. So now as we move forward, I'd like to say thank you to this group, and we'll get going.
I want to start out by explaining the strategic plan in terms of a house. And at the foundation is the mission statement, which surprisingly I've heard read twice today. So I think it's a nice touch that you read it at the beginning of every board meeting. It's a nice grounding, if you will, of the reasons you're here on the board. So that's the foundation for everything. And then if you consider the roof is the aspiration. You have an aspiration in your mission statement, your vision, and your values. These 3 things are your beacon. These are the guiding light, if you will, to the hundreds of decisions you have to make every day in a school district. And the strategic plan relates to all these aspirational values. And we have 5 different pillars, and we kind of talked about those just a minute ago, and we're going to go into some detail. Where they have a title, we'll also talk about the objective goal in each of these areas.
And if you look at them, can you go back just one moment? If you look at those pillars, we really tried to simplify and really make the verbs pronounced so that we're focusing on preparing students, supporting students, engaging staff, enhancing the partnerships that are there, as well as really focusing on operating with efficiency and effectiveness. So while the pillars may seem similar to the previous plan's pillars, they're very focused on what we're trying to accomplish in terms of those goals. We focus on the mission in terms of focusing on it validating the work, and you should know that the mission statement is really the hallmark, and you shouldn't be changing your mission statement. It is the North Star, it's the grounding of the plan. And we certainly took a look at this many times as we talked about looking at the strengths of the diverse community, really thinking about this idea, the words preparing our students, you'll see emanating in one of the pillars of the plan. And then the vision, that too did not change, but really echoed in the work to be done. When we look at, if you just even look at what's there, that sense of partnerships, and really taking a look in that fifth pillar about number 2, the second bullet, aligning that district resources with what needs to be done. And then focusing on that experience for staff and focusing greatly on all students performing at or above grade level. I have to say that that is something that I believe, compared to the last time, there was a desire for not only student well-being, but compared to last time, a strong sense of really making sure that students are prepared academically. I don't mean to say that wasn't a thrust last time, but it was very much a thrust in this focus groups and in these surveys, that people want to make certain that we are tending to that. And I think that there's something to be said that that's a post-COVID rebound. Let's make sure that our students are prepared for success when they leave us. And then also looking at those values of integrity, respect, excellence, and then valuing the community. Of the many plans that I do, I really have to say that one of the things I love about this one is the way you listen to community voice. And it doesn't surprise me that that's one of your values. It's something that really echoed through all of the pieces of the way we got results.
There was a lot of work done on these value statements in the 2019 work was done on the strategic plan, and nothing on the community input has changed anything here. Your community still has strong beliefs in the values, the vision, and the mission. So those things, there was nothing to indicate we needed to wordsmith anything or modify anything. So this is the house we're going to talk about, and we're going to have help from the Strategic Planning Committee. Each one of those titles we saw before, but we each have a statement of objective, the goals in this. And we're going to go through these one at a time with help from our strategic planning group. So now I'd like to introduce Kennedy.
Whoever's on next could come
Yeah.
front row.
Hi. All right, so pillar 1, like Brian and Joanne said before.
I know that pretty much everyone knows you, but could you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. I'm Kennedy Waddell, I'm a middle school staff member, and I was on the committee. I was here a few months ago to share a little bit of update as well. So pillar 1, like Brian and Joanne said before, a lot of the plan is connected to students, as that's the whole idea of the school district, right? So the first goal for pillar 1 is about preparing our students, and the goal is we will ensure that all students will be career, college, and life ready upon graduation when they leave us. After all the listening sessions and the survey, the key themes that came out to the committee really focused on these 2 objectives. So the first objective being rigorous and relevant instruction for all students, and then the second objective being strong academic foundations. And so underneath each objective, you can see that there's a 3 for the first one and 4 for the second objective on how to get that work done. And so for rigorous and relevant instruction, the first one, enhance the rich academic and extracurricular programming that's already in the district. 2, strengthen and enhance the career pathways so that all students have a career plan upon graduation. And 3, providing individualized and relevant teacher instruction to meet all students' needs in the classroom. The second objective about strong academic foundations has 4 guiding areas to work on. So number 1, developing student critical thinking skills. fostering student literacy and numeracy skills, deepening early childhood learning foundations, and then strengthening safe use of technology, similar to some of the last plan stuff. We'll take questions at the end.
I think it's important to note that as we look at nuances, there's a strong sense of literacy and numeracy, but technology was a fascinating part of this. That really came out very paradoxical. People wanted safe use of technology and wanted students to understand AI, but there was also a great amount of fear around it. And so it was interesting. We wanted to be safe. And so really trying to meld that into the plan became something we talked about as a committee. Thanks for the good work. Pillar 2.
I love how we're transitioning.
We're rotating.
All right, my name is Carrie Davis. I teach, I was gonna say kindergarten, I spent a lot of years at kindergarten, first grade at River Heights. And before I talk about Pillar 2, I just want to echo some things that Joanne said about how collaborative that this process was. And Amber could speak to that too as she was in it, but this wasn't led by one person or one group per se in the committee. It was an authentic team effort that really built off of the feedback from the community. So I hope that that is really recognized amongst everybody here, but also in our community, that it really was driven as without anything other than that teamwork. So pillar 2, supporting our students. So our first pillar focused on academic preparation, and the second pillar is focused on supporting students to remove any barriers or hurdles that might get in the way of preparing students. The goal statement reads, we will assist all students to be healthy and well so they can learn, thrive, and reach their goals. There are 2 objectives following this pillar. The first objective is safe and supportive school experiences, and the next one is embedded supports for all students' well-being. Underneath each of those, there's work requirements that are listed for each objective, but this was really focused on helping those students achieve pillar 1, what are the supports that we need, and that is what pillar 2 is.
Well said. Thank you.
Hello, I am Jenny Barron, and I'm here to talk about Pillar 3, engaging our staff. And like Kennedy and Carrie before me, I'm also a staff member of the district. I teach at Menomonie High School, and I'll be starting my 26th year at Menomonie High School this fall. So lots of time spent there. Let's see. A high-quality, well-rounded educational experience requires people like teachers, paraprofessionals, maintenance and custodial, food service, and administrators. The third pillar is about all staff members, making sure they are valued and empowered to reach the goals we have for all students. The 2 objectives are 1, a safe and supported work environment, and 2, relevant professional development for all. So as far as the strategic objective 1, that has 4 components: amplify opportunities for two-way communication, increase staff collaboration, recognition, and accountability, maintain competitive compensation and benefits, cultivate a supportive working environment for staff well-being. And as far as the second objective, the relevant professional development for all, there are 3 pieces to that: enhance high-quality onboarding for all, offer high-quality, relevant professional development for all, and finally, provide opportunities for career advancement. And I know you've heard it multiple times, but I would like to echo what has already been said about what a cohesive group it was to work with this team of people, and people were very honest and transparent and forthcoming with their ideas, and it was a very successful process. And that's pillar 3.
Good evening. My name is Veronica Zazowski, and I am a parent of several students in the school district of the Menomonie area. And naturally, I'm here to present Pillar 4 that speaks on enhancing family and community partnerships. We believe that when schools, families, and the community work together, our students thrive. Pillar 4 recognizes that learning doesn't happen in isolation. It's built on strong relationships, both inside and outside the classrooms. Through strategic objective 1 and pillar 4, we aim to strengthen home and school engagement. This includes helping families navigate their child's educational journey, streamlining communication tools, and connecting families to resources that empower them to better support their children's learning. Strategic objective 2 in pillar 4 focuses on enhancing business and community connections. We want to celebrate existing partnerships while also cultivating new, sustainable collaborations that serve our students and broader district. This means improving how we communicate with the community, showcasing the real impact of those partnerships, and inviting more voices to the table. Pillar 4 is about building trust. It's about building bridges within schools, homes, within students and opportunities, within education and the local economy. Together, we can ensure that every child is supported by a network that believes in them and invests in their success. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. How are you guys? I'm here to do pillar 5. My name is Chrissy Yack, and I am a parent. I also work for the county, so I kind of look at it a little bit from that perspective as well, but mostly I'm a parent in the school district. So pillar 5 is the last pillar, and this pillar speaks to the investments the community has made in the school district as stewards of our community's resources. We maintain efficient and effectively operated schools where students learn at high levels. In pillar 5, we have the objectives of 1, safe schools and facilities, and objective 2, which is the responsible fiscal stewardship. These objectives connect back to the schools, basically their alignment of resources and prioritizes them. So the very first one, as you can see, is the strategic safe schools and facilities. We want to maintain schools, grounds, and equipment, invest in technology infrastructure, and maintain commitment to updating, implementing, and for funding long-term facility planning. Objective 2 is the responsible fiscal stewardship, and that would be leverage annual staffing plan to meet the changing needs of the community and of the students. And then the second one is enhancing community understanding of the school district's operations, successes, and opportunities for improvement. And then number 3 would be the message, fiscal needs, and development advocacy channels. Can you see how great the committee was? You did an awesome job and really represented well. Thank you for doing that. As we move forward, we've begun to work on the accountability through implementation plans, and you have a draft of that, I believe, in your board packet, with key performance indicators that you are looking at measuring each of those areas, as well as looking at what is the work to be done on an annual basis? What is the work to be done in 25, 26? And I believe I'm correct in saying that by the time you act on this plan on the 28th of July, that work plan will be finished with administrators so that you're able to see those action plans like you have in the past, which is great. So that we're able to have those work plans made clear so that you're able to see that. I do want to take a moment and talk about the key performance indicators because we were very much trying to streamline those. It's not key if you have 50 of them. So as looking from a board perspective, we tried to look at what would be key for each of the 5 pillars and looked at potentially 3 to 5 for each of the pillars, but no more than that. Because if you do that, then you end up with, as it is now, I believe over 20 of them, as opposed to having many, many more as if there were 1 for each item. I think that the administration did a really nice job of making sure we looked at what really is key to show progress in these different pillars, and then in creating the work plans that follow.
And so as we look at that, the format by which the implementation plan will be created is very much what you are used to seeing. You are used to seeing some key performance measures that will be reported out, and then the annual action plan annually that is updated and put on the web so that you are able to see that. And now, as we end, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, but I also want to say thank you, Dr. Sadowski. Thank you, administration. Thank you, committee. This was really a great process.
Yeah, we're gonna thank you, Joanne and I, on giving us this opportunity to facilitate this. I think it was a great process that resulted in some, a really great strategic plan that will serve you well. So I hope you will consider this in your next meeting for approval. I want to thank the people that came tonight from the Strategic Planning Committee to share in the different pillars and explain them. It was great to have that support. And again, it probably doesn't need to be said, but I will do it anyways. It was a great group to be working with. They did a lot of good work over a number of meetings to come up with this quality plan. So with that, I will open it up to any questions anyone might have.
Thank you so much, the committee. That was amazing work. I'm really excited the 5 pillars that came out and some that were kind of relevant to what we were doing in our previous, and it's continued with that. I was just curious if someone could talk about, I noticed in our vision, we talk about culturally responsive instruction, and within the pillars itself, I don't see much with representation, not only of diverse learners, but culturally diverse families. I mean, like, is this a very perspective that we are prescribing and saying this is gonna work for all students? And I understand all is emphasized as well, but just curious if we were able to capture diversity, and I'm looking for equity in here too, just curious on that.
I think there were 3 areas where that really came out. One is in the idea of when we talk about relevant instruction, really focusing on what is relevant to all and making sure that that embraces that. It's one of the key ideas there. Secondly, and it was interesting as we looked at community and really fostering home and school engagement, one of the areas that was really brought up that we talked about helping families navigate their child's school experiences is how different that is for different families to do that. When we talked even about translation services, I know we talked about and came through as a theme that we need to make sure that for our students that are speaking a different language, that we're able to provide good services. And I think you'll see that ferret its way through in an action plan. And then lastly, as we look at even supporting students, making sure that when we focus on belonging, I think it really comes through in pillar 2 when we look at that area of making sure all students feel that they are accepted. And when we talk about belonging, that's really where I think that will be housed in that pillar. So I think you see it coming through in both the instruction, in the sense of societal well-being, and that sense of what do we do to help all students belong. And again, you'll see that ferret its way through in action plans, as well as how do we enhance the experience for families, particularly as we focus on students and families needing to navigate that child's school experience with from different cultural perspectives.
Good question.
Any questions or comments from board members?
I thought the plan was tremendous, and I thought every point was very important, and there were 2 things that I was looking for before I read it that I was most concerned about, and I was very happy to find both of them there. One of them was the need for better communication, and I found that in 2 of the pillars, and that emphasis is well noted. And the other was if we were going to have the best school possible, we have to have the best staff possible. And I was happy to see the emphasis placed on providing a competitive compensation for that staff.
Thank you. Communication was a strong theme that came through, not just navigating at junctures, but just in general with the greater community, with families. You know, we heard many, and again, some of this is anecdotal from focus groups and the like, that you know, we need to pay attention to the website. We need to pay attention to all the platforms. As you start to introduce Parent Square, how can that be something that helps families feel connected and that they have more of a one-stop shop versus where am I going to find information? That came up loud and clear as something to work on. And I couldn't agree more about valuing staff and making sure that we do so with not only compensation and benefits, but the working environment.
I want to take a moment to echo everything that was said about how, tremendous and thorough this is, and I agree that everything I've seen from the committee from the outside has been working amazingly well together and bringing lots of viewpoints and thorough community involvement. It's fantastic to see this. One thing you spoke fairly eloquently about a little while ago was in Pillar 1, strengthen safe use of technology, and this inherent tension that's in that item. I'm curious if you could elaborate a little bit on what sorts of specific concerns came out in discussions, if that's possible. Because I think that one of the great challenges is that we are in this very, complicated technological world, and what people see as the unsafe or threatening part of it can differ from person to person. I'm kind of curious if there's a quick rundown on what you heard about concerns.
I think there were many facets to that. One was, is my kids spending too much time on technology? If they are spending time in there, how do I navigate them? How do I, as a parent, actually understand what's happening in the school district? And it came from many angles. I want my kids to be prepared for the future, but I also want to protect them. And I want to understand, as a parent, what the heck is going on? So there was a lot of different angles to that. I don't know what the key performance indicators are going to be for that particular part of it, but certainly is a critical aspect of concern.
I think anytime you have a sense of unknown, I think there's a lot of messaging that could be done in terms of communicating how technology is being used in student learning. I think there's a sense of, since not knowing, people speculate on how much time students are using technology. And yet when you talk with staff, I think many staff feel it's used more at home than it is at school in some ways, in that way. So I think there's a sense of misunderstanding how it's used. And I think more messaging could be done regarding the safety controls that are in place with technology. And then thirdly, just really giving parents tutorials around how to use it so that they also don't feel that it's an unknown behemoth. And they're looking for support on how to even help navigate that at home. And that's an area that could be a little gray, but I'd say that that's an area that was also a theme that came through. But if you're asking how to do that, that's a big one. And I think that the administration
I wouldn't
can
think
take
that
care of that.
Yeah, and you remarked on kind of, it doesn't really show up in the key performance indicators. I think that's one of those things where you're not looking for progress toward a goal, we're trying to find a balance in society that we're part of, and that is very hard to pin down what progress is being made, right? So, yeah, as you talk with other districts, if you have any insights in that world, I think the other one is, the pillar 3, engaging our staff. That's in the situations where it's the staff relationship with the student, which is really going to be where that safe use is both enhanced and made safe, and so that is a pillar 3 and 2 in that world really interact tightly.
Agreed.
Michelle, any questions?
Yeah, Michelle, you have any questions?
I am here. I was just very impressed by the question that Emily asked and thrilled to hear the answer. So I'm just still perseverating on cheering over that. Really, is more of a comment. I'm just super impressed at how this team came together and for the community's input into this beautiful presentation that's just so manageable and understandable to go through. I just really appreciate it. It feels like a solid next step to our previous plan.
I would say in closing, one of the things I'm most proud of it, besides the committee's work, is It's key that the work is continuing, that you're not going 180 degrees, whoa, this is totally different. But each pillar has nuances that reflect work to be done that's germane now and for the next 5 years. That's new work to be done. And I love that there's a connection to the work from the previous plan, but there's also, that recognition of, ooh, we could do more with communicating with the greater community, or we could do more to engage all staff, or we could be tighter around some academic preparation. That doesn't mean that we're moving in a different direction. It's a nuance to the existing pillars. And I think that anytime you can connect puzzle pieces for your community so that it doesn't feel like this all new, but no, it's connected to the work, and yet it's nuanced new work, is a really good message to leave you with.
I'd just like to say that this looks like something that we'll be able to work with well. And I appreciate your leadership in bringing this to us. I've known you for a long time, Joanne. I don't know, lots of years, see you at state conventions and so forth. And I really appreciate the committee back there too. I think you guys did an awesome job. And it was nice to see you come to board meetings. You should come more often. I think it's your faces once in a while. But yeah, I just want to say thank you. I think it's workable and I think it's going to be key for us as we move forward. Thank you.
Any other final comments on this item?
Okay, so again, thank you, committee members. I know you're all busy and certainly are excused to leave when you find it to be appropriate. But again, yeah, Brian and Joanne, thank you. Amber, being the representative from the school board, it was very helpful. Amber provided a lot of suggestions throughout the process, which I think board members even feel very well represented. I guess just a couple final items I'd like to bring up is our process of developing an annual work plan really fits perfectly with our new strategic plan. And that's one of the reasons why we've had such an effective process, is because we don't just have this plan now that's gonna sit on a shelf for 5 years. Every single year, we're gonna develop this annual work plan, and then from that point forward, we have our KPIs, our performance indicators, key performance indicators for the accountability piece. So as we shift to that, board members, I know you're probably all excited to provide more feedback too on some of the specific goals coming up for the 2025-2026 school year. So as this comes forward and we start to develop the annual work plan, we'll certainly be looking for board member feedback. So board members, if you do have particular work plan items, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, because the lead team is meeting tomorrow. We'll start drafting that process up, and we'll still have time throughout the summer. I think we would expect to have that in front of you in August. So there is time, but we also know that time will go very quickly. But the process we've used has been good, and I look forward to engaging that with board members over the next several weeks. Thank you.
And just one structural thing I wanted to mention, as we look at the work plan KPIs, one thing I know everyone has noticed, but I think it's worth reiterating, that the key performance indicators are indicators, they're not targets, right? The target is the values and the objectives that are more abstract and broad. And the key performance indicators are, helpful hints along the way to making progress, right? The goal isn't to hit 92%. The goal is to improve the situation overall. And if you happen to hit that number, that's a good indicator, but it's not the target.
You're not done.
You're not done yet, right? We don't want to be teaching the test, right? All right, thank you for that. That was great. Our next discussion item, annual review of curriculum standards. As soon as it's Brian.
Yep. So this is an annual process. This year, we do not have any new or updated standards. I did include in the background of public comment, the DPI has a timeline for review of Wisconsin academic standards, and those are the ones that we base our standards that we use on an annual basis off of. So if you're interested at some point in time in digging a little bit more into that, you can see that there are a handful of standards that are currently scheduled for adoption later this fall with some updates, and then an intent to review some additional standards. The state of Wisconsin works on about a 6-year cycle. In some cases, it's simply reaffirming the existing standards, and sometimes there's a more comprehensive review that happens. But this is informational, so it's not something that comes back for a vote later on. All of this information is publicly accessible on our district website as part of our curriculum transparency page that we put together several years ago. So if there are any specific questions, I'm happy to take those, but this looks very similar to what you've seen the last few years. Questions or comments from the board?
How many years does this happen to the review for the standards?
So it's on a cycle of about every 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah. Every once in a while, there's one that might get delayed or moved up, but generally speaking, every 6 years. Go ahead.
But I'm curious to know if you can just briefly explain how the essential elements are different than the standards.
Absolutely.
The same or different?
Yep, absolutely. And if I miss anything, Tony can also help chime in here. The essential elements are built off of the Wisconsin standards, academic standards within the different content areas, but they really identify the big picture or what really is kind of at the meat of what those content standards are used for or that they target. It is for our students who ultimately may be taking our alternate state assessment. So generally speaking, that's 1% or less of students in the state of Wisconsin to see whether or not those foundational pieces that would help indicate whether or not they have a basic, or I should say not basic, but a general understanding. So in mathematics, for example, if we're looking at addition or subtraction, it may not be to the same level of the academic grade level standards, but do they understand the concepts that lead to an understanding of addition or lead to an understanding of subtraction, same type of thing with language. So I hope that answers your question, Michelle.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Other questions? All right, hearing none, let's move on to a few budget items in a row. First item 5C, discuss the 24-25 budget revisions.
Yes, so I submitted another round of budget revisions for you, so I can explain those just a little bit. The first one regards teach loan grants. This was put in as a revenue for the 24-25 school year. We are not receiving those, so that is a change to reverse those out of the revenue. Just to keep the expenses even and balanced, the health insurance was over budget, and so to balance that out, I would propose lowering the expenses by the same amount so that the Fund 10 would not be affected. The next one is Fund 39, which is a long-term capital debt. Of course, the board did approve the $4.6 million to pay down the debt, but there was no formal budget revision to reflect that in the budget. So that's what that next box is asking for, is to raise that amount. Again, that was approved before, but no formal budget approval, so that's what that reflects.
Thanks. Any questions or comments from the board? All right, let's move on to the potential year-end budget transfers.
Yeah, I'll start by introducing this, and board members, you're familiar with this process, and what happens is we get to the end of the school year, and Eric has been working with the business department and identifying the hundreds of line items in the budget that are either over or under budget. And our staff members do a great job of being very frugal, not overspending. So typically what we have is we have a number of line items that end up with more revenue than expenses, And even though individual line items might not be much, when you add up hundreds and hundreds of line items, all of a sudden you have a pretty good savings. And there are some that are higher, which Eric can explain. But we get to this point in the school year, we're past the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. But the way it works in the state of Wisconsin is that the school district does have the opportunity to make a year-end budget transfer before the end of July. If that is done to something like Fund 46 or Fund 73, if that's done, it counts as a shared expense for the previous fiscal year. By having those shared expenses higher in the previous fiscal year, that then allows state aid reimbursement in the future year to be higher. That's one way that we've maximized state aid and reduced property tax levy through that mechanism. This year is no different. We think we have the opportunity to do that. Eric, would you like to explain just a few of the reasons why, and then we can maybe take some questions?
Sure, so we do estimate that we will have a surplus of around 1.25 to 2 million for this fiscal year. Reasons for that is that health insurance costs, which is a huge item in our budget, health insurance costs coming in lower than was budgeted, so that led to quite a bit of that. There was an overestimation in the amount of the OPEB contribution, the other post-employment benefits. And then several items in the 300, Object 300 series that came in under budget, such as personal services, technology-related repairs and maintenance, non-technology repairs and maintenance, and printing. Those three particularly, those expenses came under budget, which led to a surplus. And again, this is only, there's still with some time left in July here, there's still expenses coming in and still things to be looked at and done, but this is just a preliminary estimate of what that might be.
So what we would like to do is bring to the board at the next meeting, which would be July 28th, a recommendation for the board to consider. And at that point, if the board approves a year-end budget transfer, then Eric will be able to make that transfer the next day and beat the deadline at the end of July. And again, we'll talk about the state budget in a little bit, but with the way the state budget was handled, I would say that this year, more than ever, it's important to try to maximize state aid because the state did not put any more funding into general aid. So all new dollars next year from the revenue limit are going to go on the local tax levy. So I think this mechanism that we've used in the past would be even more important. The other thing is, we've heard, from many different aspects of our fund balance, our general fund balance. So even in the event that the year-end transfer was more than what the surplus ended up being and ended up putting the budget into a deficit situation, that's not necessarily a problem. There is a suitable fund balance, and it's not like those dollars are going away. They're just going to be put into the fund and then reimbursed through state aid the following year. Any questions?
I think that especially I think it's a good idea, and especially as the, Fund 46 is currently unfunded in the budget. When we can get that state aid and invest in, our buildings and resources long term, that's a good idea. We know we have some large capital expenses possibly coming up with various repairs to things, so I think it's a good move in this case personally. Any other questions or comments on the end year transfers?
Yes. I appreciate explaining where the extra or non-used funds are coming from. I'm curious about how we project this in the future. Like 1 to 2 million in the black at the end of the school year feels like a lot to me. And so I'm curious if all of this is like unpredictable or if the way things ended up this year will help us to land a little bit
closer next year? Because to me, it's great to have 1 to 2 to put in the Fund 46, especially since we're not putting in the 800,000. But it also is not just extra money, it's money that probably should have been used in programming for this past year, or potentially could have been used. So I'm just curious if there are places where we're overestimating and can cut back, or if this is a fluke.
So in the preliminary budget, health insurance costs were only raised by a couple of percentage points. And I think in the past there was a greater increase in that. Various other ones too, I tried to look at actual data from past years. It's difficult to speak to, you know, the budget that was created, because I didn't create this particular budget, so it's difficult to speak to, you know, what my predecessor was looking at, et cetera. Yes, I made it with this preliminary budget and continuing as we move through the budget process, look at actual expenses. Health insurance is a very difficult one as well, because that can go either way, and usually the swings are very exaggerated. So that is one that I really keep an eye on to make sure that you know, those expenses are accounted for moving forward.
If I could add to that, I know exactly what you're talking about, Dominique. And especially when I came from Cadet to Menomonie, when I heard like $1 million, that seemed like a lot to me. But then when we look at the scope of our budget and over $40 million of operating, we're very likely going to be within 3% of our budget, which is actually very, very close. So even though the sum of $1 million seems like a lot, the percentage of how close we were to actually nailing the budget is quite good. And we have for years, if we're gonna make a mistake, we've made a mistake a little bit on the conservative side. But again, it also goes to the budget managers, our principals, our directors, our food service, everyone does such a good job trying to be good stewards of our community's money, that I do appreciate the fact that people don't go over budget unless there's something that really is unforeseen. So I appreciate the point. I think I'm very happy with how the budget is going to come out.
I think we're certainly all glad that we're over, not under. It's a good problem to have. I guess one of my questions, or my next question is, typically when we have gone over, our first plan is to roll it into 46, I think, because it, I think, so then it's counted as spent dollars. And I'm curious if there are other options that, for example, like wiping our school debt, or school lunch debt, sorry, be clear here. If those, all the school debt, but like, if there are pockets of something like that we could do that could directly support our students. I know it's not like I know that we can't put it away for like next school year's programming, theoretically, but like, is there another option we could do that could directly impact our students and staff?
Yes, the board does have options, and just to give you a little bit of past history, so starting my 12th year here, and Amy will remember this, when we first came in, school district finances were not in good shape. And the first thing we had to prioritize was building our fund balance up to a more reasonable level, which we did. The next thing is we had a huge unfunded liability for post-employment benefits. So that was step 2. And then once those 2 things were taken care of, then step 3 was Fund 46, the capital improvement plan. So that was kind of the vision for financial security that we had, and that has been very effective. To Dominique's point, however, yes, the board could choose to do other things, including let that money stay in fund balance and defer it for future expenses. If it stays in Fund 10, however, in the fund balance, the state aid will be delayed until the dollars are spent, which is fine. It's not like you're losing state aid. You're just essentially deferring it to the future, because the state aid comes after the dollars are spent. So, while that could be done, knowing the state of our Fund 46 and the fact that it's essentially going belly up in just a matter of a couple of years, my priority would be to continue funding our capital maintenance plan, but I recognize and appreciate that that's a school board decision.
Well, it doesn't have to be one or the other, right?
No, you could do whatever you want. I mean, whatever you don't spend, yes, whatever dollars you don't spend in Fund 46 won't be there, but you could do both. You could do some of both.
Let me ask, this point says kind of between 1 and 2 million. I assume you're working through the numbers in detail, you know, before the next meeting, so we have the exact number. Because if it is pushing 2 million, right, versus it's a little bit under 1, those are kind of very different worlds of what Fund 46 kind of needs, right? And the immediate, like, you know, if we were, it seems to me that we kind of ideally kind of want 800K going into Fund 46. That was the intent. And now we're, last 2 years we haven't done that. On the other hand, both last year, looks like this year will be additional, you know, kind of money that wasn't spent through the budget that is available for Fund 46. And so then, yeah, I think Dominic's question is a really good one about, are there other ways we could be using that money in a way that directly impacts students and also reclaims some degree of aid fairly rapidly?
I don't think we could apply it to debt after June 30th and have it count as a shared expense. Which again, that doesn't, you know, it's not like it's a huge financial loss, but you are deferring the state aid for a year.
So it has to be a fund transfer, right, in order to count?
Yeah, there's only a few exceptions to the June 30th deadline. The two that I am most familiar with are Fund 73 and Fund 46.
Maybe it'd be useful when this comes back next time to have just a quick paragraph about what funds are available for that sort of transfer, so that we have that information at least for the future.
Can do that, yeah.
Other questions or comments on that end of your budget question? So that will come back for a board vote on the 28th. And as always, you know, I think feel free to follow up with Joe and then via Joe, Eric, to for any more detailed questions and so on. Even if that means we're all informed and kind of have a sense of how we want to use the funds. All right, next, review of the state biennial budget. You want to kind of summarize the state of play?
Yeah, board members, I'm not sure how much of this you've had an opportunity to review. So some of this will be on the go a little bit. We are learning more each day about the impact of the state biennial budget that was approved in the middle of the night and signed by the governor the first week of July. And for good reason. My understanding is that, you know, it really was a race against federal legislation, and there were, I believe, billions of dollars of healthcare funding that would have been restricted had our state not acted so fast. Because of that, however, you know, months and months of a long process and negotiations and advocacy and everything really just got whittled down to, you know, just a real late night negotiation, and it ended up being a bipartisan negotiation. And when that happens, it, you know, kind of seems like neither side really gets what they want in terms of compromise, but it got done. And I think for the state of Wisconsin, that was very important. But in terms of education, what got done is interesting. The revenue limits will be allowed to increase by $325 per student each year of the biennium, but no new dollars in general aid were approved in the budget. So for the first time, since I can remember, it's been quite a while, the revenue limit increase is gonna 100% go on property taxes. And that's something that's going to be difficult to explain, but there will be a property tax increase because of the way that things were handled. It's a little frustrating just simply because there was a sizable surplus coming into this process, but there's a lot of things at play in terms of how this was decided. But there is new money in the revenue limit, which we are pleased with. We're very hopeful that the revenue limits, some of the inequities would be addressed like they had been in the previous budget, where some schools receive a high revenue limit per student, whereas other schools like Menomonie are at the bottom. But there was no change there, so we just got the same as everyone for this time around. Special education did receive a little bit of an increase, which will help us a lot, with about 17% of our students receiving special education services. The reimbursement rate is going to increase to probably about 40%. The amount approved, the percent approved was uncertain, so even though it might say 42%, what's actually going to be reality is probably closer to 40%. But we do think that that's going to have a positive impact on our budget, probably to the tune of around $400,000. There are other expenses, however, as a result of the budget. The open enrollment program is going to, the cost of that program is going to go up probably around $86,000. And then private school vouchers, even though those do not affect our bottom line, they do affect the tax rate in our community, and we expect that the total cost of that program is now going to eclipse $1 million and impact local property taxes. So that's kind of the high points. I did write a school crossings column to try to explain a little bit more and provide some context. I do not plan to send that out until the end of the week, and I certainly would be very interested in any suggestions that board members have and trying to help our community understand exactly what's going on with the state budget.
I thought the school crossings was really informative and well done, and I would encourage you to get it out many times, in many formats, in many places, to help explain the situation.
Thanks, Cal.
I also want to say thanks for this budget impact PDF with the tables. I found that very helpful this afternoon, looking through it to understand what was going on. Because I think, like all of us, I've received lots of questions the last couple of weeks about what actually happened in the budget. And you know, I knew the headlines, but didn't actually know what it meant for us. So it's hard to do on the back of a napkin. And you know, Eric, you can correct me. The way I read this is that basically we have an essentially negligible change to the actual revenue, 229,000 we estimate. But something was that roughly a 5% increase to the mill rate, something like that, right? So,
yeah, I don't know what percentage it works out to, but about a 28% increase.
28 cents.
28 cents,
Yeah, 28
yes.
cents per mill, from 559 to 587. So yeah, it's a so we see higher tax impacts with essentially no change to the actual operating revenue. It just is kind of moving which cost things come from, but primarily it's more from property taxes.
Correct.
Yeah, so obviously that's going to have implications for the board in terms of how we think about, you know, working with our debt at the end of the year. And if we look, you know, at talking with taxpayers about potential referendums, if there's issues of heavily built capital or operating in the future. So it's something to keep a close eye on, I think, is how people understand what these numbers are. And then we still have, even with this change, we'll still have a very low mill rate compared to every nearby district. But it is notable that the district is getting essentially no new revenue of any form, but there's an increasing burden on the property tax later. So that's my take anyway. Other questions or comments people have?
It's not perfect, but it's better than what I thought it was gonna be. I thought nothing, we weren't gonna get anything, so, you know, it still needs to go a lot further. I think all of us realize that, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
The unfortunate thing is, I think it is going to lead more and more districts to need to go to referendum. It just is not going to keep up with inflation, it's not going to keep up with the needs and expectations of communities. I know we already went to referendum once and it didn't pass, and we've had to reduce some things and, eliminate some programs, and unfortunately, I think the way this is, it's going to put even more districts in that situation. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to, keep working together and offer the programs we have for a little while longer, but they can only be stretched so far before additional revenue is needed.
This seems like a tangential question, it sort of is, but in response to the statement you just made, Joe, do you happen to know how the state CPI is coming in this year, or how it's estimating it?
I do think it's trending a little bit lower than it had been a year ago. So I think it'll be probably closer to 2.5, but we still have a ways to go.
What's CPI?
Consumer Price Index, or inflation rate, yeah, there's an official state table of inflation, which is used for all the computations, so. Echoing Dale's statement, I think that maybe it's just me that I love looking at the tables of numbers, but if there's a way to distill some of the points in this 2-page PDF, even more narrowly, I think to Dale's point about saying, giving the message about how the budget looks and where the money's coming from, as many ways as possible. And I think the school crossings is a great avenue to communicate. And as you kind of fill out that story, I think these numbers, to me at least, are very compelling. I don't know if they're anything else, but I really appreciate looking at what the actual effective changes in the dollar amount at the end of the day. Anyone else have anything to add? Okay, let's move on to the reviewing of the proposal for the staff perception survey.
First of all, I'd like to say that I stand corrected. Abe had asked a question at the last meeting and about our school perception schedule, and we have a schedule of every 3 years. And I was mistaken at the last meeting, thinking that we had one more year before the perception survey would be up. However, I was confusing a kind of interim survey we had done related to getting staff perceptions on compensation. So after last meeting, I did go back, I double checked past notes and history, and we are due for a staff perception survey this coming school year, and the timing is perfect. I did reach out to school perceptions, they've done this now, they have longitudinal data, which is very helpful. It seems like every time we do this, the data gets more and more useful. So the proposal is there for the school board. We plan to move forward with this, but I still would open up for any questions, concerns, suggestions as we get ready for the next school year.
Do we need to vote to spend the money to do this, or will that be next meeting?
I will put it on the next agenda to vote, Amy,
Okay.
just simply because it wasn't in our plans, in the preliminary budget plans that the board had seen. We can certainly build it in, it's not a huge amount, but I think knowing that and how it came forward, I think it's most appropriate to have special action.
Okay, well, since you said go forward, I thought maybe we should vote, but I can wait till next time.
Thank you.
And have we used this before, school perceptions?
Yes, I think this will be the third time in the cycle of a 3-year cycle. So yeah, they have longitudinal data, it's very helpful. And also some of the KPIs in our new strategic plan are directly related to the staff perception survey.
I remember at the last state convention, it was of course school perceptions gave a presentation which was partially a sales pitch, but also found it very compelling about increasing the rate of these surveys and interleaving them so that we do staff, community, parents, I don't remember which exact word we recommended, in a rapid sequence that you can correlate, after you see changes to the staff, how does that affect the students, how does that affect the parents, how does that affect the community in a delayed sort of way. So I'd be curious when you reach out to them, in terms of that, if they have recommendations for cross-correlating data, what would take the cross-correlating data to do more of these sorts of studies? I don't want to spend all of our money on surveys, but I also think that the sort of data we can collect from the broad community can be very helpful. Especially if we can see impacts on both teachers and students and families in a way that's close enough in years that it's not, well, the last one was 2021 or something, and we're looking at 2025, 2020, or 2026 for the next one. It's pretty hard to draw correlations.
I'm curious about if in the past we've added any of the additional services and if that's the plan for this time.
Yes, typically we have had school perceptions provide some reports, and then also we have had school perceptions present to the staff. We think there's been value in having a third party. It does cost some additional dollars, but I think there's value in having a third party present the results.
I'm also, I ask because I'm also interested in the comment reports, because I think a lot of times, my recollection from like taking these is that people feel like they wrote their heart and souls out in the comments and then nobody in the district ever sees them. So I think that would be a good addition.
I'm glad you brought that up. We have utilized the comment reporting as well.
Dominique, you asked the question I was gonna ask too, how much of this are we gonna use, all the extras?
Other questions on that agenda item? All right, next we have the second review of the calendar of board reports, which is attached.
And Abe, if it's okay with you and the board, I would like to punt this one more time to the end of July. We would like more time with the leadership team to look at this tomorrow and bring it back to the board one more time. I don't think there's a huge rush for it. We'd rather have it be accurate than rushed.
Thanks. All right, next, items related to next meeting dates, board committees and reports. So July 28th is our special school board meeting in this room. August 11th will be the director of school board meeting. New teacher orientation, August 13th and 14th. Then PD the day, week of 19th to the 21st. And the special school board meeting and annual meeting will take place on August 25th at the high school. And I'll leave it there for now. We're gonna take a 5-minute recess and then come back for a closed session.